recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Michigan's 12 federally recognized Indian nations, for historic Indigenous communities in Michigan, for Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and for those who are forcefully moved from their homelands. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Michigan State University more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. My name is Dani Vincent. I'm a third-year student here at MSU studying environmental science studies. Wow, studies and sustainability. I have 2 minors. One's in environment and health, and my other is in business. And so I have a little bit of experience in the sustainability realm, but don't worry if that seems a little bit difficult maybe to comprehend. We're going to make sure that we break everything down today to help everyone understand what we're referring to when we show you the sustainable development goals that we have here. So just a little bit more about me. I'm one of the student assistants as well as a student Eco-Rep Fellowship Coordinator. It's a long title. I'm also a part of ESSU, or known as Environmental Studies and Sustainability United. I'm also an SLE Student Leader Council member and also a Student Sustainability Leadership Council member, as well as an ASMSU Ad Hoc Committee member. So there's quite a lot going on there. But most importantly, I'm so very excited to be one of your moderators here today.
Alright, so I'm Kenzie Stabler. I'm going to be your other moderator today. I am a third year in environmental engineering with minors in business and in energy. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I, like Dani, am a SLE student sustainability assistant and an Eco-Rep Fellowship Coordinator as well. I do take place in Student Sustainability Leadership Council and Society of Women Engineers. Alright.
Amazing. So if at any point today you find that you have questions that you want to bring up for the Q&A at the very end of the panel, feel free to, if you've noticed when you walked in today, there are a lot of whiteboards in here. With that being said, there are markers on the right-hand side of the stage up here that I have laid out. If you're interested in taking some notes as far as maybe some questions that you want to ask that we ask that you ask at the very end of the panel rather at the beginning, then please feel free to write them down, or even better yet, if you have a computer or phone, feel free to type them as well, just so we make sure we can cover any and all questions that you have. But again, we like to ask that everyone kind of keeps those until the very end of the panel so we can have all of our panelists share their amazing stories. I also do want to say thank you to Google for teaching me what sustainability means from the very beginning. And so as many of you might know, the definition of sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. That is a very, very vague explanation of what sustainability is, but it might be very familiar to all of you. I do want to point out that we brought our panelists in today specifically to discuss what the SDGs do within their realm, within their fields, their roles, or their positions. And so for today's discussion, we're really trying to highlight which SDG goal it is that they're bringing, and more importantly, how do they connect to these different courses and these different jobs, because sustainability has been so impactful in so many different avenues, and so showing that that tie between different careers into different positions and taking it off campus is so very important. So if this is where it begins, we're going to also talk about where it can go. I also want to talk a little bit about our SDG goals. So we have our icons up on the board here, and I'll let Kenzie take over from here.
Perfect. So SDG goals, it encapsulates a lot, as we can see off to the side. There are 17 goals if you guys want to take a note of each one. But to start off, we want to ask people to raise their hands if they've heard of the SDG goals in general. All right, so a nice amount. And okay, so one more second. Please keep your hand raised if you believe you have worked or held a position in a group or organization that corresponds with one of the SDG goals. Nice. Okay, I'm gonna hand it back to Dani real fast. But that's good.
It seems like we've hit our target market, that's for sure. So if you aren't familiar with the SDGs, this is for our visual learners. I'm a visual learner myself, so anytime I see this image come up, I immediately know what we're going to be discussing. And so if this helps at all, each SDG icon represents something different. So this might seem a bit more familiar to all of you. Maybe you've seen this in class. Maybe you've been on Google and just doing a daily search and this came up. We want to make it familiar, and we think it's very, very convenient to kind of have them laid out as well to kind of give you a good idea of what we're going to be discussing today. But most importantly, I also want to talk a little bit more about the history just before we get into our panelists. So each of the United Nations member states in 2015 decided that this was going to be a blueprint for peace, prosperity for people and the planet. So each one represents something different. We have number 1 is no poverty, 2 is zero hunger, we have good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, and innovation and infrastructure. We have reduced inequalities, we have sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and finally, we have partnerships for the goals. So there's a lot there and there's a lot to take in, but we're super, super excited to introduce it to all of you if you aren't already familiar. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it back over.
So now that we've kind of done our big introductions about why we're here, we want to kind of talk about who's here with us. So today we have 5 fantastic panelists who are willing to discuss their roles. So I'm going to pass this microphone down in a minute. We're going to start with Kayla and move down. So if you guys could please announce your names, pronouns, years, majors, organizations that you were involved in, and the SDG goals you're planning on talking about, and then we'll get more into the nitty-gritty with each of you guys.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Kayla Braggs. I am a second-year master's student in the Department of Agricultural, Food, and Resource Economics, also known as AFRE. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but I did my undergrad at Florida A&M University, where I studied food science and agribusiness. In my second year of my master's, so hopefully going to be graduating this semester and defending my thesis. My research focuses on the intersection between producer and consumer decision-making and how that impacts supply chain sustainability, especially for medium and small-scale producers. So since coming here to MSU, kind of hit the ground running with my involvement both in and outside of the department. I am on the College of Ag and Natural Resources Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I am a National Student Officer for Manners, which is Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. This is my 4th year on the National Student Officer team, having served in roles as the Region 2 Undergrad Vice President when I was an undergrad, National Undergrad President, and now currently the Region 5 Graduate Vice President. Also working with MSU's Ag and Bio Research and MSU Extension. I actually went to Morocco this past summer as a student panelist for an initiative that they're doing as a global ag initiative with universities across the globe. And I will be focusing on the Zero Hunger, which is Sustainability Goal 2, and then also Responsible Consumption and Production, which is Goal number 12.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Stevens. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior studying genomics and molecular genetics and human bio with a minor in anthropology. I'm here representing Alternative Spartan Breaks as well as the Center for Community Engaged Learning. I'm the co-president of ASB and I'm a student assistant at the center. And I will be talking about number 10, reduced inequalities.
Hi everyone, my name is Cade Person. I'm a 3rd year in environmental engineering here at MSU. I'm also a research assistant with Dr. Kristen Shetton in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. My research focuses on mass timber. A couple different projects that I'm involved in is an investigation in the current landscape of mass timber education in structural curriculum across the nation and developing curriculum modules that can improve the offerings of those courses across the nation. I'm also investigating the current embodied carbon analysis through life cycle assessments of manufacturing processes of those mass timber components. I'm also the vice president of the Environmental Engineering Society here on campus. And through the lens of mass timber, I'll be talking about sustainable goals 9, 11, and 13.
Hey everyone, I'm Veona and I'm majoring in genomics and molecular genetics with a minor in math. I work as a professorial assistant in Dr. Aguirre's lab with stem cell research, and I also work as an undergraduate researcher in the Cellular Reprogramming lab. Apart from that, I'm the secretary of the Student Advisory Council for the College of Natural Science, and I am an eco-rep through the student life and engagement, and through this experiences, I think I'll be talking about the goals 3, good health and well-being, number 13, climate action.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Blaszkiewicz. I'm a senior studying business management and apparel and textile design. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I will be talking about number 12, which is responsible consumption and production. My expertise primarily relies in the realm of the fashion industry. I'm the co-creative director of Vim magazine here on campus, and I'm also the co-president of our Fashion Design Student Association.
I don't know about you, but I think that made me more excited about the panel after having those really nice introductions, so thank you to all of you. Now to get started, Kayla, we're going to start off with you. So Kayla's research focuses on how the intersection between producer versus consumer decision making impacts domestic supply chain sustainability for small and medium scale farmers, while also looking at how federal agricultural policy plays a role in this area of agribusiness. Since coming to Michigan State, Kayla has hit the ground running in both in and out of the department. Kayla, please tell us a little bit more about your experience in becoming a self-proclaimed accidental agriculturalist and how your role in research correlates with Sustainable Development Goals 12, responsible consumption and production, as well as number 2, zero hunger.
So I am a self-proclaimed accidental agriculturalist. I actually titled that, I did a TED Talk last year, so that was the title of my speech, The Accidental Agriculturalist, Breaking Barriers and Changing Narratives in the Agricultural Industry, because I am in this industry purely on accident. If you would have asked me 6 years ago what I'd be doing, I would be finishing up my last year of rotations in pharmacy school. I grew up liking science, being good at math. My maternal grandfather is a physician, so it was natural, go be a doctor. But then I realized I didn't necessarily want to go through the grueling process to become a physician. So I was like, what else can I do? And then I decided pharmacy kind of was the next best thing. 6 years, I can graduate, get on with my life, but then realized slowly I didn't want to be behind the counter looking at pills all day. So I was like, what am I going to do? And when I decided to go to Florida A&M, they actually have a College of Agriculture. They are a land-grant university like Michigan State is. And I stumbled across the food science program. And that year they introduced tracks, the business and industry track and the science and technology track. I decided to go with the business track and minored in agribusiness, loved it. Thought I was just gonna go to a food company and work there, but decided I wanted to go to graduate school because really the reason I'm here is because of COVID. I went home to my family of 4 and our grocery bill slowly started to increase. My dad was like, someone has to stop eating because I'm tired of paying these prices. But I was like, there must be an issue, and it came down to supply chain. So you couple increasing prices of beef because you're having slaughterhouses backed up for 6, 9, 12 months, or milk trucks are pulling over and dumping their fluid milk because they have nowhere to take it if you're used to going to schools or movie theaters or stadiums. So I decided I wanted to go to graduate school to really kind of tackle the supply chain issue, especially in the ag space. The supply chain overall is not resilient really at all. It's, a few of the big players who control 75 to 90% of all of our agricultural production processes. So trying to figure out how we can kind of impact that to allow smaller and medium scale actors to participate in the supply chain, as opposed to relying on, for meat processing, for example, your Tysons or Cargills or JBS, allowing small scale producers to be able to take off some of that load. So if there is kind of a kink in the chain or a major global incident, there's no one person we're relying on. And then from a research perspective, my thesis is looking at consumer preferences for branded beef products. So beef is sold very generically here in the United States, but when you think about chicken or pork, you think of Smithfield or Tyson or Wayne Sanderson or Purdue Farms. So my thesis is looking at how we can introduce breed information, so they're certified Angus beef, but trying to introduce that to allow dairy producers or dairy beef producers to participate at a wider level. Now, a lot of people don't know that you actually eat dairy cows. A lot of times, if you've ever been to Texas Roadhouse, you probably had a Holstein cow. The cows you mostly see for milk production. So trying to open more marketing opportunities for those producers on a larger scale. from a sustainability goals perspective, from a zero hunger, a lot of people throw out the word sustainability but don't know how to define it. And part of defining that is being industry dependent. Sustainability for a livestock operation is not going to be the same thing for a row crop producer. Even for then digging down to the nitty gritty, rice is not going to be the same sustainability goals as corn. So trying to understand what sustainability is and then being able to dial down from there. So of course, increasing sustainability, a lot of people automatically think of organic. But you don't want it to become an issue where food becomes a hot commodity where it's no longer affordable, and then hunger becomes an increasing issue more than it is now. It shouldn't become a luxury to eat. So trying to balance between, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be sustainable or conventional versus organic. It doesn't have to be, vegan versus meat eating. So trying to strike a balance between what is sustainability and also what is sustainable in terms of feeding people. And then from a responsible consumption and production perspective, understanding or being able to also offer education to producers about these sustainable methods. A lot of times people think, producers are just trying to make money. Well, really they're stewards of the land. They've been doing a lot of these practices for a long time, but when you think about trying to introduce a new production method, you may not see, return on your investment for years to come. A small rice producer in South Arkansas or a peanut producer in Georgia can't take years to receive a return on their investment. That investment is the difference between supplying food for their families or not, or making a payment on their equipment or going into default on the loan. So trying to figure out how to get these educational resources out there for producers at varying scales so that they can take these risks, so that they can, expose their production methods to other people in their community, and that way we have more sustainable future in the moving forward.
All right, next up, we have Alex.
Thanks again, Kayla. So for Alex, we've heard from you that you've already worked at, hold on, I'm gonna read this. Alex has worked as a student assistant at MSU Center for Community Engaged Learning, or CCEL, for the past 2 years. CCEL works to integrate meaningful community partnerships with instruction and reflection to teach civic and social responsibility and strength. She is also one of the co-presidents of the RSO called Alternative Student Breaks, or ASB. ASB works to provide students with quality educational service experiments throughout Michigan, the United States, and internationally. Alex, can you please elaborate on what it means to be a member of Alternative Student Breaks? In both your positions, you have the task of researching a set of SDGs. We know that you are familiar with SDG 10, which is reduced inequalities, so could you please tell us how the work you have done applies to SDG or any of the SDGs you've also worked with?
So Alternative Spartan Breaks is a smaller sized student organization or club, and we work to send sort of volunteer experiences rather than the word trip. We want to make an immersive experience where students not only provide valuable service to different communities, but also learn something and become advocates for social change. So the main components of our program is training, orientation, and then reorientation. So students are provided with education and resources before they embark on their service experiences, and then they are also provided with resources during their experience. And then after, we also try and reflect and figure out ways that we can move forward and bring what we learned in these different places. Like they mentioned, we go internationally around the country and throughout Michigan, and then we also try and bring it back to Lansing and work with community partners here. And we do a lot of work with community partners. We don't go in trying to save or fix communities. We work with the resources they have and really try and uplift different communities, and also kind of give students a different perspective of places and social inequalities that they might not have seen. We really focus on highlighting oppression, power, privilege, and making sure students really understand the roles these play in our lives and the lives of others and how everything is interconnected. And it really works well with the Sustainable Development Goals. We assign each experience that we send a couple goals to help them hone in on them and really focus and get a deeper understanding. when I first was introduced to the Sustainable Development Goals, I didn't understand how they would connect to volunteering. I've done volunteering throughout high school and just, kind of go give some time and then go home and go about your day. But ASB has really showed me how it's more than just, I think of sustainability kind of like recycling or planting trees, but it's so much more than that. Everything is interconnected, and the SDGs really highlight that we need human well-being, personal well-being of humans, as well as the well-being of the planet to really have a sustainable and beneficial future. So that's what we kind of work with ASB. It's more than just environmental impact, which we also address, but also we really focus on reduced inequalities in a lot of different areas. We've worked with refugees, food pantries, land restoration, just different aspects to really immerse students in different cultures that they are not really exposed to here on campus or might not have thought of before. Another one we also really focus on, the Center for Community Engaged Learning, which kind of houses ASB, is good health and well-being. So we really want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and providing resources for students to be really prepared. One great aspect that we do is we work with the local hospitals and preparing future doctors. A lot of students come to us to volunteer at the hospitals, and this is a great resources that they can have to get some exposure. We do tutoring for local elementary students, just different ways that students can be involved with, they want to be more involved with communities, and this really helps with the good health and well-being and reduced inequalities.
We're gonna head on to the next person, so I'll let Dani introduce Cade.
I think the best part of having panelists with different ideas and perspectives on different SDG goals is really important as well, to kind of give others an understanding of where each can kind of take place. And so I think it's really, really interesting that between both Kayla and Alex already, just from the start of this panel, we've already learned so much just about, their different avenues and their different positions and the different roles that they hold and the experience that they both have, and how we kind of already gone back to about 3 or 4 SDG goals. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. But to kind of continue on with our panelists, I want to give it over to Cade here. It's a little funny. So SLE Sustainability has had the privilege of doing a sustainability tour for the past 1.5 years. And so this last semester, was the first time that we included the mass timber here at the STEM building. A lot of students aren't familiar that the building that we spend so much time in studying and learning is actually very commonly known for having mass timber. So just to kind of give a little bit of an overview, Cade's research focuses on analyzing knowledge gaps in mass timber and civil engineering curriculum and identifying areas of future energy efficiency improvements and decarbonization and mass timber manufacturing. That's a mouthful, I'm not gonna lie. Cade also works at the MSU Industrial Assessment Center as an energy and sustainability analyst. So SLE Sustainability has had the pleasure of going on one of Cade's tours for the mass timber tour here at the STEM building. Something we found interesting was learning more about the environmental benefits of using mass timber compared to using steel, and how it helps to reduce the carbon footprint on a large building such as this one. We understand that you want to discuss the SDG goals 9, 11, and 13 and how they relate to your research in mass timber. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
So one cool thing about environmental and civil engineering, especially here at MSU, with the environmental program being top ranked in the nation, is that it is the crossroads of sustainability practices, but also technical applications, which is something that might not be seen in other disciplines in engineering. Typically, engineering is kind of seen as very technically oriented, or people make designs that are focused on the profit at the end of the day. But with civil and environmental engineering here at MSU, we're learning about sustainability and applying that throughout the process, whether that's designing a water and wastewater treatment or designing a building here on campus that encompasses these SDGs. So we are sitting in the MSU STEM Teaching and Learning Facility, which is the largest mass timber building in Michigan. At the time, it was only the second, but since our implementation here, those rates are increasing across the state, which is great to see. And that's thanks to our work here in the Mass Timber at MSU department, which is run by Sandra Lupian, who is the director, and then also Dr. George Berghorn in the School of Planning, Design, and Construction. So their work has, their work and their the communication with partners up at the state legislature, with manufacturers across the state and the country, with schools, and then other departments here on campus. They're working towards increasing mass timber awareness both in the state and across the country, which is great to see. Some of you might not be familiar with what mass timber is. So mass timber is when they take traditional panels of lumber, that like a 2x4, and then they hydraulically press them into these large layers, and then they stack multiple layers on top of each other using glue and then a hydraulic press. So it creates this structurally sound component, but it is also sustainable. You might be asking or concerned about how it is sustainable when considering the harvesting of lumber, but part of mass timber is that with the economic advantages of increasing the use of the product, you're also increasing awareness of sustainable forestry. So by finding the economic value in not turning a beautiful piece of land with plenty of trees into a Walmart parking lot, and finding the value in that, that is promoting the sustainable forestry. So it's this reciprocative cycle of finding the value in the structure and the material as well that makes mass timber such a unique building material when compared to steel or concrete. One thing about the STEM building is that it also uses an adaptive reuse approach. Many of you might not be familiar with what this used to be on campus. This used to be the Shaw Lane coal-fired power plant that operated from the 1930s to the 1960s, and then it was closed down and left vacant for years. You might remember, look at photos and see a smokestack next to the Spartan Stadium, and that's what it was. So it sat vacant for years, and they weren't sure what to do with it. One thing that professionals here at MSU wanted to consider was finding a home for these challenging STEM courses and labs. And so they were looking for green spaces, which were unused pieces of land, but then they also considered this brownfield, which was the piece of land that was left vacant. So instead of completely tearing down the building, they took an adaptive reuse approach. They took the foundation of what we are standing in now, and then decided to build on top of that. The process started in 2016. They started having those conversations, but mass timber wasn't even on the menu. They were gonna go with steel and concrete just because that's what was familiar. From 2017 to 2018, Dr. George Berghorn and Sandra Lupian had these conversations with the partners on campus to get mass timber in the conversation. It took 2 years, but after comparing the cost of a hybrid steel and mass timber structure to a typical steel and concrete, it was only going to be a 2% increase. So with MSU wanting to kind of flex their muscles and build this home, this innovative home for these STEM courses, they realized that this investment was going to be worth it. So they proceeded. Construction began in 2018, continued throughout the pandemic, and then the building opened in July of 2021. So that's just a brief background on kind of the house that we're in currently. But you might be, the specifics of what makes the mass timber in this building sustainable or worth considering is that the carbon that is absorbed through photosynthesis while the material grows, it's then sequestered in the building itself. Hopefully, we expect this building to last 100 to 150 years, so that's a long-term storage and prevents all that carbon from being emitted into the atmosphere as if it were burned for other means. So it's stored in this building. Exactly 1,856 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents are stored in this building, which is the same amount as not driving a car 4.7 million miles or not burning 2 million pounds of coal. So the sustainability of this building is so unique, and it might not be something that you consider when you're walking these halls. So just being involved and learning about this research and about this building that I love to sit in and reflect in and do my work in, it's great to see how it connects engineering with sustainability, which is an intersection that isn't typically considered. My work with Sandra and Dr. Berghorn through the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering and also the Industrial Assessment Center is all these avenues that are interconnected and finding ways that manufacturers can be more sustainable in their practices, how they find their materials and source their materials can be more sustainable, and also how we can improve learning and access to that learning so we can become more, be more aware and then also go out into the field and apply what we learn. So finding opportunities to implement SDGs in engineering has been a unique and exciting process that I've been enjoying to be in. Thank you for being here, and hopefully if you have any questions we can answer those later.
So thank you, Cade. I don't know about any of you, but every time I come in the STEM building now, I have been on this tour so many times that you'll catch me just staring at the mass timber at times when I walk in, where I used to like walk in and just try to find like a seat and a table, and I was like, no, all I have to do is get, work on my exam or study, and I'm like staring at like the open ceilings or like looking at like the sap, and so it's a very, very cool topic to discuss and to learn about, and so if you're interested in any tours, let us know and we'll get you hooked up there. So amazing. All right, well next we have Veona, and I'll let Kenzie introduce you.
I'll just point out something real fast. I'm in class with Cade every day and I just learned so much, so he's a great resource if you want to ask him more about that stuff. So next we do have Veona. She does happen to be one of our SLE Sustainability Eco Reps, so we're a big fan of Veona. And she had a roundtable discussion the other day. It was awesome. It incorporated art and the environment, so she's really well versed on that. But I'm gonna go a little over Veona's background real fast. So Veona she's actually in genomics and molecular genetics. I may have mispronounced that. Her research is in cloning zebrafish embryos. Her interests are driven by her passion for understanding the complexities of nature and finding a way to integrate science as well as her love for the environment. So Veona, we have a few questions. Veona, we know that you study genomics and molecular genetics, and so as a woman in STEM, how has the work you've done in the lab applied to the SDGs that you mentioned that you're going to be focusing on earlier? And what work do you hope to accomplish in your future career, and how do these correlate to the SDGs you plan on discussing?
Thank you, Kenzie, for these wonderful questions. Kind of overwhelming, but I'll try to answer them. So she gave me a really good introduction. I love research. I'm very much into what I do in the lab, and as much as I'd like to go into all the details of what I'm doing, I'll try to keep this focused on sustainability. So how I understand sustainability is by this basic approach when we learn to give more than we take. And using this simple philosophy, we can basically inculcate sustainability in any aspect of our life, be it industry, be it our eating habits, be it our shopping habits, anything, you can be sustainable. So with that in mind, I approached the research in my lab a little bit differently, keeping SDGs in mind. And I realized our sustainability is more than what we do in the lab. It is 10 years from now how our research is impacting people. So I said I'll be talking about good health and well-being. And my research is very focused on human healthcare and improving disease treatments. So sustainability in that is finding the balance between giving treatment to people than taking money from their pockets, right? So how much are we working towards making medical treatment affordable to people? How close are we to achieving that vision that we've put for ourselves? And that is how we approach sustainability as a bigger question. And I know, Kayla, you talked a lot about balance and how important that is, and that is a really important question when we talk about sustainability. For me, in medical research, sustainability is about giving more than we take. So what can you give? You can give medical knowledge. You can talk about having discussions like this. Our lab lets you do that. We go to conferences, symposiums, when we are sharing, and with the only purpose of sharing, when we are only giving, we are being sustainable. I'm also an eco rep, and I really want to talk about this a lot. I love everything that I'm learning through the student life and engagement, through all I'm doing through the eco rep. And what I learned about sustainability through that is it is multifaceted. You have economic sustainability, you've got environment sustainability, and then you've got social sustainability. And through the EcoRep, we are focusing mainly on environmental sustainability. How are our actions impacting climate change? How are we thinking about ourselves and our future generations more than the present? Every action, however minor it is, has a repercussion in the pattern of life. So with that, we'll be talking about the Sustainable Development Goal 13, climate action. And through the EcoRep, Kenzie talked about my roundtable discussion, and I did an event focused on art, tribal and indigenous art. And we looked at how through art, you can understand environment-centric approaches. When you look about indigenous tribes, you can't help but notice their love and passion for the environment. Everything that they did was centered around environment and nature, be it the models of their drawing. They drew a lot of inspiration from that. And as a result, they were very protective of their environment. They were very protective and preservative and conservative about nature and their uses. They did not generate waste. They did not lots of other things. Everything that they did was focused on nature, and we can learn a lot about their beliefs through the art. One of the artworks that I talked about and through my roundtable discussion was Madhubani, which is an art form in India. And an interesting fact is people drew deities on trees so that other people don't cut them off. And that is how they prevented deforestation. So sustainability is a lot more than recycling, like you mentioned. It is just that approach that you have in life that's going to change the way you act. And hopefully that is what we take from this event.
That was very successful, and so we're hoping to have another one in the future. And we didn't realize that we had an artist on our hands either, so we should have brought up the artwork too. But all right, and last but certainly not least, we have Kate. So we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about sustainable fashion, and I want to point out that my outfit choice today was not influenced by everything that she works on. So thank you so much for being here today. Now, so just a little bit about Kate. Kate serves as a co-creative director of Vim Magazine, a student-run fashion and beauty publication. She also acts as a co-president of MSU's Fashion Design Student Association and is a member of the Michigan State University Honors College. We loved hearing about the creation of your paper dress. Could you please tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to go more into the sustainable fashion realm and how it relates to the SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production? And if you want to talk a little bit about your trip to New York City that you won, no one's going to stop you.
All right, so talking about the fashion industry, it's really my responsibility as a designer, the way I see it, to educate myself on the impacts that the industry has, because it really reads as a glamorous, shiny industry, but on the other side of the coin, there are a lot of really ugly things that go on, and a lot of people aren't aware of them. And I'm studying business, but I'm also studying apparel and textile design, and a part of that program is learning about the impacts that we as students are going to be contributing to as designers in our careers, because the fashion industry, unfortunately, is one of the leading unsustainable industries that is available. And everyone here wears clothes, no one's naked that I see, so it really impacts every person in society, so it's a really big deal that we understand the industry that we are giving our money to. So there are a lot of different trends that are happening in today's age that are really contributing to an unsustainable decline in the way the industry is headed. And one of those is the trend cycles. I'm sure all of you are aware of micro trends and fast fashion and the way that that is headed. But in the past, the fashion industry would release new clothing maybe 2 times a year, up to 4 times a year. And now it's every few weeks. And that is very, very, very horrible for our environment, but also for the workers who are producing these clothes. The fashion industry is not only an environmentally unsustainable industry, but it's also a massive human rights issue that a lot of companies are not acknowledging. So who's bought clothes from H&M, Zara, Target, department stores? Come on, you all have. Everyone has. Those companies, when you look at the tags, it will say made in Bangladesh, made in Vietnam, made in China. And the reason for that is not only is it cheaper to outsource that labor, but it's also because the labor laws are a lot more relaxed and they are exploiting those people who are making those clothes. So Bangladesh is one of the biggest countries that is utilized because it has the most relaxed labor laws. Unfortunately, there are no protections for those people. They're working in very unsafe conditions. They are not making livable wages. They don't have any child care plans. It's really splitting up families and creating a lot of unrest in those countries that these brands don't talk about. And the clothing that is produced by these companies, because they're produced so often, they need to be made very quickly. They're made from cheaper fabrics. They're not made to last very long. And that's a problem because we are feeding into this cycle of, you know, these clothes only last a few washes, they might have holes, they might wear, they might be pilling, and that leads people to get rid of them quicker and quicker. And that is a waste buildup. Which is going in landfills because clothing is not biodegradable. There have been some advancements in recycling textiles, but that has a long way to go because the problem is when we are wearing clothes that are made of synthetic fibers instead of natural fibers, which means it contains plastics. So that's like nylons, polyesters, rayons. They've been chemically processed. They can't be recycled because when you recycle a fabric, it needs to be chopped up into really, really tiny pieces and recreated into fibers that can be woven into another piece of clothing. But when you chop up these clothes, they create a lot of heat and the plastics melt and you cannot transform them into fibers anymore. So only natural fibers like cottons can be recycled. So that means all the things that we are wearing that contain polyester, nylon, rayon, nothing can happen to them, and that's a big problem. And fibers like, I believe rayon comes from wood pulp, which sounds like a great idea, but the problem is when it's chemically processed, it's treated with chemicals to turn the wood into a pulp, and then it's pushed through, imagine like a shower head, it's pushed through really, really tiny holes. Those create threads, and those are woven into the fabrics. And when you have threads like that that are treated with chemicals, they can't be rebroken down and used into another thing because it's been so heavily chemically treated. And these chemicals that are so common in all of our clothes, they're used in the dyeing processes, they're used to make things look shiny. When we put words or emblems on our clothing, really, all clothing production has chemicals involved. That is a huge amount of pollution being dumped into the environment. But, so that goes with number 12, which is responsible consumption production. Production is a huge issue with all the chemicals and dyeing processes, but also consumption. Our generation, especially with TikTok taking off, we buy into micro trends. We know when things aren't cool anymore, so we can buy things that are. And we want a new bikini in the summer because we're going on vacation, and we want a new dress for graduation, and, you know, I want a new top for my birthday. I'm 100% that girl too. I'm not saying that I'm a saint over here, but it's our whole generation. And that's the problem of micro trends and buying into this industry that tells us when things aren't cool anymore, we should get rid of them and get something that is. And that's the problem that we need to be working on, is how we view our clothing. It's not something that's disposable. You can't throw clothes away. They either get donated, which is sustainable but unsustainable, because the process of getting those clothes to the correct people takes a lot of energy and resources, and especially when they're sent overseas. Sometimes they go to help people, and sometimes they're being fed into a secondary market that is not very helpful to those people. So it's a double-sided coin. I mean, there's a lot that goes into making clothing. Clothing is necessary, we all need it, and it's a very profitable industry. It feeds the economy, but the level of consumption that we're currently experiencing is not able to be sustained. The resources that we're draining and the rate that we're getting rid of our clothes, it just has nowhere to go. So that's going to be our problem when we grow up and the landfills are full and our clothes that are made of plastics will not be breaking down. We're going to have to figure out what to do with all of it. Especially because these fabrics that are being made with a cheaper quality, it's easier for them to get holes now. Before, if you wore clothing and it started to get worn out, you could turn it into the thrift store, but now the fabrics are so cheap they won't hold up. You just kind of have to throw them away if it gets holes in it, and then everything piles up. So it's difficult because it's all something we're feeding into, but something we're not really acknowledging, and I also play a part in that. But our generation kind of just needs to be more aware of what we're feeding into, because if we aren't more knowledgeable about how many people this affects, it's really going to start to take a turn as we get older. Sorry, I know that was really depressing.
Do you want to talk about your trip or about the dress you made?
Oh, sure. This is a bit of a happier story. So last year there was a competition in the ATD department, which is apparel and textile design. And I was new to the major at the time. I came in as a business student, so I really had no business signing up for it, if I'm being honest. I had no idea what I was doing. But the winner got a trip to New York Fashion Week, so I was like, yeah, oh my God, of course I'll sign up for that. The catch was we couldn't use fabric. So when I was thinking about what to use, I really hated the idea of buying something and throwing it away, because I wasn't about to wear tinfoil on campus, so I knew I was going to get rid of it after the competition, so I turned to paper, and it really eased my mind that I could recycle it afterwards. So I got a roll of paper, and it was actually a very fun material to work with, because it holds its shape very nicely. So structure was actually pretty easy to achieve. But I was fortunate enough to win the competition and go to New York, and it was an absolute dream come true. I feel so lucky to have experienced that. I met a lot of industry professionals, and I will admit it was very glamorous. Like, there are two sides of the fashion industry, and I wish people talked about the other side more, but I did feel very fortunate to experience the fun side of things and get to be immersed in the environment of creativity that lives there, because those people live, breathe, and work fashion and care about it so much. And being in that room full of people who decide what we wear is very interesting. We learned about, I went to the Champion headquarters, and we went into their back room where they decide what clothes they're going to make for the next season. And I asked them how they know what's going to be cool. And they said that there's a team of trend analysts that are specifically dedicated to deciding what will be cool for us to wear the next season, which I thought was crazy. But it's these people's jobs to learn about colors, what colors are going to be cool, what's in, what's not, studying trends, what are these designers releasing, what commonalities are we seeing this season, why do things look the way they do, what are the consumers' priorities this year, and they kind of analyze all this data and put it together and decide what the future of fashion is going to look like. So now that's starting to change a little bit because within the influences of TikTok, anyone can go on the app and say this is cool now, and if it gains enough traction, everyone will feed into it. But in the past, it was a lot of data analysis where an entire team of people would go out in the world, go to Italy, go to Europe and Africa and the United States and everywhere to see what are people wearing, why are people wearing that, and what will they want to wear in the future. So that was what I took away from in the trip, which was so interesting, but it also feeds into consumerism a lot because fashion is built on what's cool changes. It has to change so people want it again. So that was very interesting.
Thank you so much for sharing. Can we please give the biggest round of applause to our amazing panelists that we have today? You're all so incredible, and you have so many great positions, and I'm sure so many of you listening are just thinking about your roles as well. If we could have 1,000 panelists, I so would, I promise. But we want to give everyone an opportunity really quick. If you have those questions that you either wrote down or maybe you typed out, wherever you might have put them, does anyone have a question that they would like to ask now? Yeah.
I can wait, excuse me. No, you're good.
Hi, I love your outfit, by the way. What's your name?
Thank you. I'm Cade.
Oh, Cade, okay. So I'm curious because I've been thinking a lot about that lately around like donating. Can you talk a little bit more about the secondary markets?
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off by saying I'm not an expert in this, so I'm going to tell you what I know, but I can't completely answer that question. To my understanding, donating looks very different when you're donating to charity versus donating to your community. So when you're donating to your community, your clothing is not going very far. That's when you drop it off to your Goodwill or Plato's Closet and it's bought by somebody else that lives near us. And that is one of the more sustainable ways of donating because it doesn't need to go on a truck or be transported overseas, and we are lessening the amount of resources. It's more of a direct way to get clothing to people. It's not to say that donating clothing to charity is a bad thing, because it's not. But sometimes that clothing is misused. We watched a documentary in class that kind of talked about when you donate, it was a certain country, I believe it was in Africa, where people were donating their clothes overseas, but it was not just given to these people. It was kind of cycled into this market that the people themselves were selling to the other people in their town, and they would sell them at very high prices. So even though we were donating them, they were still being resold for profit at prices that people couldn't afford, and that it wasn't being very helpful in the end. So donating is tricky because I don't want to advise against donating. You should absolutely donate. It's a great thing to do. Just look into the charities that you donate to and see where it's going, because I feel like some forms of donating are more direct than others. And it's also something to keep in mind that when you are donating to a place that is very far away and it needs to be driven by a truck or flown by a plane, then obviously that fuel is being emitted into the atmosphere, and that's a factor to consider too. So when you're donating clothing, I would more recommend to a local church or a Goodwill or a thrift store of some sort around here, just so it can trade hands more directly. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. I also have a follow-up question about that because, so I usually donate to Goodwill, but what happens to the clothes that do not get sold? What happens after that?
Okay, so, oh,
Go ahead.
okay.
I'll follow up with you.
Okay, I want to say I'm not completely sure. I've heard some things, but I'm not sure if they're true, so I don't want to spread misinformation. I'm not sure if they're redonated to a charity or I've heard that they're thrown away, but I'm not sure if that's true, so I don't want to tell you that it is.
You're absolutely correct. What I would recommend when you're donating to a charity is call them and ask them what they're looking for.
Okay.
So for example, Goodwill, I'll throw them under the bus right now, is they will just throw them away if there's too much, because there's so much fashion, there's so much in the clothing stream, there is not enough places to take all that we're donating, unfortunately. And some people don't understand what they're donating. They're donating rags. You know what I mean? They don't understand the good quality. So there are certain specifications that a lot of churches, like St. Vincent de Paul and other places, will take, but they want you to wash them, put them in a bag, and organize it. That way you know they're doing something with it, to do something. So definitely look at your charity first before you just drop it off somewhere.
Thank you for adding that.
Absolutely.
I almost feel like that kind of ties into recyclables, how we all kind of throw things together and they all get contaminated and so they get thrown out anyway. So maybe we should just be, I mean, I know I have to learn personally how to be a little bit more considerate of the things that I recycle or the things that I donate and the format in which I do so. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yeah? Hold on, I gotta run.
I'll meet you. All right, hello, I'm Alyssa. I'm the girl that learned to sew at one of the upcycle events. Just gonna say, it was completely free and I learned in under 30 minutes, so it's worth your time. But I have a question for, is your name Kayla?
Yes.
I have a question for you. You've talked about like marketing cow brands on the beef products. So what are the benefits of advertising the type of cow on those beef products?
So you don't have to run, I can start my answer. So I'm trying to figure that out. So when you're doing research for like a master's thesis or a dissertation, you're creating information. So my goal is to see a few things. One, do people care about breed information? So certified Angus beef exists in the marketplace. It came out around 1979. And they've kind of exploded to the point where they've marketed to where you think you see an all-black cow, that's the best beef you can get. But they are a very small subset of the market. And so I'm trying to see if you have a few different, let's just say, ribeye steaks. If you see one that doesn't have a breed on it, if you see a certified Angus beef, if you see a certified dairy beef, or see a certified Holstein beef, what is your highest amount you're willing to pay for it, your willingness to pay for that product? And then take it a step further if it has traceability information on it. So are you willing to pay a little bit more if the traceable back to the farm of origin is guaranteed on there? And so we're trying to see, do people care about breed information? Is that kind of a way that companies or brands can market their products a little bit better to kind of expand the market share? Because over the past few years, especially after COVID, people have become hyper aware about where their food comes from and want to be more involved of where they kind of fit into the agri-food chain. And so, one, do they care? What are they willing to pay for it? And then once you kind of establish that metric, how can producers who produce dairy type cattle or dairy beef, which is a cross between a dairy and a beef breed, how can they kind of capitalize on that information? Because right now, if a Angus or purebred Angus cow was to go to like a JBS, which is a large scale processing company, and then a Holstein producer was to go to the exact same plant, they would get discounted because they are a dairy type cow. So dairy cows are bred for milk production, they're naturally heavier, taller, and have a higher bone to muscle ratio. So they anatomically are a lot different, and so you need specialized equipment to process them correctly or they're gonna drag. So they get discounted for that perspective, but they actually provide high quality, consistent beef products, especially because of their feed efficiency. They actually grade prime a lot more than Angus. So trying to open marketing opportunities for these producers, and that way it's more of an equitable food system.
Thank you.
This whole adulting thing has me grocery shopping, and I have to say, it's information like that I'm slowly learning, and I find it's really, really fascinating every time I go out to the grocery store and I'm looking at all the brands and all the, all the beef and all that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Do we have any other questions from the audience? The more the merrier. Yeah. I'm gonna run a marathon after this, I swear.
So I just had a general question of where would you recommend that we shop in terms of food to make sure that we're actually getting truly organic food products? Just because I know if you go to places like Meijer or Kroger, they'll often label it with free range, but we don't actually know if it's free range or not, or there's been some kind of back and forth discourse over whether that's kind of false marketing. So besides like the obvious Whole Foods or things like that, where would you recommend to just kind of buy most of our produce and other foodstuffs? That's kind of a tricky question because labeling is important is because people are becoming hyper-aware, but there's so many labels out there. There's free range, there's grass-fed, there's organic, there's animal welfare, there's all kinds of labels that you don't really know what they mean or how they interact with one another. And so part of my research also is trying to figure out kind of consumer preferences, what's important to you. Is organic important to you? And take it a step further, is organic produce versus organic meat versus non-GMO versus conventional grains or seeds or oils. So trying to kind of decipher what's important to you, what you're willing to kind of pay that premium for. And then I personally shop at Kroger, and if you really pay attention, their organics are sometimes on sale. And I opt to go that way if I can, or sometimes you start to, especially when you shop kind of at smaller, more boutique markets, you can get a lot more local products, and so those a lot of times are organic because they know that they can get a premium that way, and they don't have to travel as many steps to get to the market. So if you get, Michigan dairy product, it didn't have to travel as far. It's a little bit more sustainable to get to your grocery store, to your home. So first deciding what is important to me, what am I willing to pay a little bit higher on, what am I willing to pull back on a little bit. So in my case, I'm willing to pay a little bit more for meat and produce versus, grains, corns, rice. I don't really have as much of a discourse with that. But also not having the mentality that organic is the best thing ever and conventional is bad. Both can exist at one time to where you can buy conventional in one area, you can buy organic in another. The purpose is to feed people, because as long as we want to survive off of not the diet of a plant, aka sun and water, we have to eat, and that requires food. And so in order to feed people, that requires sometimes, GMOs, but GMOs are sometimes in place to feed more people. Water resistant or water resiliency or insecticide resistant, so that you don't have to put as much pesticide on your crop in order to make it grow. Especially with the changes in climate, GMOs kind of are needed because of the variability in your growing seasons. Like 70 degrees in March in Michigan is not what we need.
Yeah.
So just trying to keep that in mind when you're shopping.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah? We got to connect. We'll go here and we'll come back.
Thank you. This is for Cade. I was wondering, I follow Mass Timber on LinkedIn. I've heard a lot about it, and thank you for all the information just now about it. I've heard a lot about Mass Timber and how it is effective for in learning, like studying it in academia. But what I haven't heard much about is what companies are using it in the real world to help promote sustainable construction. Do you know of any organizations or companies that are taking initiative with this?
Yeah.
Hold on, my 5K starting.
There are a bunch of different kind of sectors.
A lot of it is centraled around residences, but it also comes down to what the codes are. And because steel and concrete are a lot more familiar to the designers and to those working in construction, those codes are improved more frequently and approved more frequently. And in a lot of the cases recently, they were working with the 2015 codes for mass timber. It's currently 2023, so they're very outdated. Or sorry, 2024, wow. They're outdated, and so this lack of knowledge has prevented some implementation, and that's what we were working on from a perspective of college curriculum. But recently in Michigan, there's 2 new projects. One is a residence development in Ann Arbor that was just recently approved, and then also a office building for the Department of Natural Resources for Michigan. So there's different types of structures that mass timber can be implemented in, but kind of commercial and also residential, those are the top ones that we're seeing trends improve in. There's also been some parking structures that have been tested, and then those are used as ways to compare mass timber versus hybrid structures versus steel and concrete. So because they're very replicable, they're easy to compare and use in studies, so to see the environmental impacts across those different things. So there's different types of structures, but mainly we're seeing increases in implementation in residence and then also commercial.
So would it be safe to say that there's a lot of information that we're still kind of learning about mass timber to utilize it in different structures as we kind of continue from there?
For sure.
Mass timber isn't necessarily a new concept globally, it's new nationally. Mass timber has been used since the mid-1900s in Europe and Australia, and so we're kind of looking at the work they've done and seeing how it can be applied in the US. It's especially important to consider the forestry that we have in the Pacific Northwest, also in the southeastern regions of the country, because there's opportunity for development because we have the forest, we have, there's a desire to become more sustainable and also be innovative, and mass timber is at the crossroads of both of those concepts. And so by seeing where we can go with mass timber, it's very exciting and allows for a lot of opportunities for educators, for designers. It's a great material, and we're seeing a lot of growth and acceptance of it currently. So.
Thank you. All right, do you still have the question, or did I make you forget it? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Autumn. My question's for Veona, is it? So I want to know more about your art event with Indigenous art. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that? And have you been a part of other art and culture, like sustainable events going on campus?
Brad, just do it. Go for it.
I'm so glad that you asked it, because that's all on my mind since the event on Tuesday, was it? Yeah. So what I like to do, I've been drawing for a while now, and I like the idea of repurposing in my art. So I draw on anything, from paper, from wood, from pencils, anything that I see, anything can be a canvas. So with that in mind, sustainability was not a far off idea. And recently, I wanted to keep a journal. That's what inspired it. I wanted it to have a theme, and I was looking at tribal art. And not just drawing, I wanted to learn how the meaning behind it, and then I realized a common theme, and that was how environment-centric they all were. So I had a couple of different cultures all over the globe. I had some from Australia, Aboriginal art, some from China, some from India, some can't think, Mexican, Aztec art. So all of these are explored, and each of them had a very different thing, very unique, cool fact that I learned. So for China, for example, nature is bigger than man. So if you look at any Chinese drawing, you'll see nature and then one tiny little image of a man you can't even make out. And for them, that is the idea. Nature is bigger than yourself, and it is something that you have to think about every day. You are nothing compared to nature, so you cannot influence it and be negative to nature. So that is a very important value that you can learn just from one simple art. Similarly with the Aztec art, for example, in the Mayan culture, it is all about sun and worshipping the sun. And this is because of this ultimate reverence that they have towards it, because the sun is the essence of life. Everything is living because of our proximity to sun, the ideal distance in the solar system. They realized that, they were wise enough to understand that, and they loved it so much they worshipped it. So it is values like this that I want to encourage, and I'm really grateful for the EcoReps for making this happen. Without you, I would not have been able to share it right now, even talk about it. So I think we are planning another event in April, and keep an eye out. I would love to have you there.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Don't be shy.
Going once, going twice. No, I'm just kidding. Well, if you think about them a little later on, I know that Kenzie and I have a couple questions that we want to ask. So anyone up here, any of the panelists, if there's something that applies to you, please feel free to give us an answer. But one of the questions that we have is, what advice do you have for other students who want to get involved in sustainable initiatives? Ooh, I need to slow down a little bit. And how would you recommend them to get involved? Do we have any takers?
On campus specifically, I'm sure you all have heard of the MSU surplus store. That's a great resource. Also, I know everyone knows about thrifting, also a great resource. If you're looking more in the Michigan zone, but not specifically campus, there is a company called Nextiles that is a textile recycling company, and they will take your clothing and use it to be recycled into fibers that can be used to create more clothing. The only thing to keep in mind with that is what I stated before about they can't take clothes that are mostly synthetic, which is your spandexes, polyester, rayon, nylon, things like that. They will mostly take cottons because those are what can be used. But if you live in the Detroit area, you've got some jeans or some t-shirts or whatever that you wouldn't really thrift because they're too worn out, that's also a great option.
I'll shout out the Sustainability Instagram, who recently put together a list of the courses that are available that focus on sustainability concepts across disciplines. So if you're interested in getting an elective credit or just trying something new, that's a great way. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for me taking a sustainability and engineering course. Although it was a required course, it was something that I wasn't interested in to begin with. I was interested in water and resource management as an environmental engineer, but this course flipped the switch for me. It was the breadth of the concepts was interesting, but the professor also discussed the application of these concepts that we were discussing in the course. So not just mentioning what the 3 pillars of sustainability are, but how those can be applied to engineering and how we can be involved and engage with those concepts is what was super interesting to me. So by taking new courses, experiencing different things, you might find something that you're interested in. If you are interested in something that one of your professors is discussing, maybe visit their office hours or meet with them after class and see what opportunities they are aware of, if there's something in their lab, if they can connect you with someone on campus or a student group. That's a great way to get involved and just see what's out there that you might not already know.
I want to go off something he said, and he talked about, I'm looking at you, Emily. We have our social media page. It's the Office of Sustainability, or is it just Sustainability, MSU? It's just MSU Sustainability. See, I'm on it so much, but I don't ever remember the name. Emily Hill up here works very, very hard to put all those postings out, and so if you're interested and you have Instagram or social media and you can give them a follow, or if you can take a look, you'll see that our faces are on there too much, and we need volunteers to help us with reels. So if you're interested in being on the page, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to share your experiences and all of your wonderful roles, if they correlate with the SDGs, or if you just want to learn a little bit more about campus sustainability. All right, do we have any more takers for that? If not, I've got another question. All right, so what partnerships or collaborations have you formed to advance sustainability efforts and the SDGs at MSU? Have we had any partnerships yet?
So last year I was a part of, I would call it a fellowship with the Farm Foundation. That's a nonpartisan organization that really tries to advance the agri-food industry across multiple sections of the agri-food chain. So they have a lot of what they call next generation programs, the Young Farmer Accelerator, Young Agri-Food Leaders, which is for emerging young professionals. And then I was an agriculture scholar, which is geared towards students who are studying agriculture economics, interested in policy work. And so it was a year-long program. We go to different meetings and events that the Farm Foundation holds, as well as different events just across the industry. So that includes the USDA Ag Outlook Forum, AAEA, which is the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association annual meeting. And then we also got to go to a few roundtables that the Farm Foundation holds, which are more so discussion-based events that talk about different topics, and each roundtable has a different theme. And they really try to hone in on, you know, nuances or sophisticated topics going on in the industry, and sustainability is one of those big things. And you really have to have a pulse on policy in order to make real change with sustainability. And then also one of the trips we went on was to France, to the European Association of Agricultural Economists. And in Europe, they're really kind of the front runners when it comes to sustainability efforts and mandates when it comes to their food, and not just food that is produced within Europe, but also food coming in from other countries across the globe. So really trying to get different perspectives of what people view in terms of sustainability efforts, and also just how to approach that, and then bringing back that kind of knowledge to MSU, and then in my research for future goals, working in the policy realm.
So I'm on the Student Advisory Council for the College of Natural Science, and well, we're not talking about environmental sustainability, but like I said, sustainability multifaceted, so we have a level of economic sustainability, and that is what the College of Natural Science tries to do, so that we are sustainable in terms of the time that we are spending on certain courses, time management, sustainable in terms of expenses, sustainable in terms of funding. So you'll learn about all this, you'll be a part of this engaging discussion where you can have your opinions or influence university policies that drive these initiatives. So I think that is also a good place to get involved.
All right, so we only have a couple minutes left, and so I want to respect everyone's time. If you have any questions, if some of the panelists are able to stay after maybe a couple minutes, maybe we can get some questions answered, or maybe a good networking opportunity, just throwing it out there. But I do know that we might have an announcement. Is that right? Did I get that right? I don't know. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura with the Office of Sustainability. This has been so beyond incredible. I am so blown away by all of you. And even for our guests and audience members, the questions that you've been asking, like, I can't even tell you how proud I am as a Spartan, and to have you and, you know, our body of students here just participating in this. This is truly like one of the best events I've been to in like years. So I hope that this has been really enjoyable for all of you. But can we get another round of applause for our panelists? And then I want to give a huge, big shout out to the students that really put this together, the masterminds behind it, Dani, Kenzie being our moderators. This is student-led. Obviously, the panelists, they decided they wanted to make this a student panel, and what a tremendous job that you've done. They put this together very, very quickly. This is part of SDG Week, part of the University Global Coalition, trying to raise awareness around the SDGs, and I just want to give a round of applause to them for organizing. Carla, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I don't. I just exactly want to do that. Dani and Kenzie work for me, and they were telling me what to do today. So they had it all planned out. They had it organized. They just told me to get food. So we're good.
I was gonna say, it started with a lot of nerves, and then over time we were like, both of our faces started easing, so I felt a lot better about it. Amazing. Again, thank you so much. We wouldn't have a panel without all of you here. Like Laura mentioned, your questions were incredible, but I see that there's no longer sun out there, and I'm sure we have assignments and homework and exams and blah. Anyway, Thank you again so much for coming today, and if there's any pizza left, please grab some on your way out. And if you have any questions, we're going to stay after a couple minutes, so thank you.